In our last video, we spoke about if statements using Boolean values. In other words, using variables that hold the value true or false, and how that value will determine whether or not the code inside of the block that belongs to the if statement will actually be executed or not. Well, Boolean values inside of variables are not the only way to use if statements inside of our programming. We can also use what are called Boolean expressions. Now, while I talked about the Boolean values, I did reiterate a lot that anything within the parentheses of an if statement, so right here, is going to be an expression or a Boolean expression. So what do I mean by an expression? Now, an expression is a portion of code that results in a true or false or some kind of output or some kind of calculation. In this case, we're talking about Boolean expressions, so we're speaking about an expression or a block of code that outputs or results in either a true or a false value. If we look at this right here, we could just use true. We saw that example. We can just use false. Both of those are contrived examples that would either make it so the if statement always executes or never executes, and therefore are pretty worthless to us. We also, in that last example, said let my var equal true, and then we can use a variable in here which would potentially hold a true or false value as the result of some other operation or data received. Right? So that is a little bit of a review of just using regular Boolean values in the form of variables inside of our if statements. In this video, what we want to concentrate on are Boolean expressions. So a Boolean expression, let's do that really quick. So Boolean expression. A Boolean expression is going to be a little block of code or a statement of code that results in a true or false as its resulting value. To show an example of this, we can do a little Boolean expression using our equality operator and our not equal operators that we learned in the operators video. So let's do an example and let's store the result of it and print it out to the console. So let results equals, and let's see if the number 5 is equal to the number 10. And then let's go ahead and send that out to our console so we can look at it and see what we get. Now, as expected, we get the value false. And that is because the expression right here of checking to see if 5 is equal to, or exactly equal to, or strictly equal to 10 results in a true or false. It's a true or false question that results in a true or false value at the end. And here we're just assigning the result of that expression into the variable, and then we're outputting the variable. All right. So that would be a Boolean expression. And we can use Boolean expressions just like this one inside of our if-else statements in order to control the flow of logic through our application based on whether or not conditions are met. And those conditions don't just have to be themselves true or false. They can be, as we saw here, numbers, but through a comparison, we can determine whether or not those numbers are equal, which does equate to a true or false. And because it equates to a true or false, we can use it in an if statement. So let's go ahead and put that in an if statement. Let's say if 5 equals 10, then we want to go ahead and do something. So let's go ahead and put this out, and let's say 5 is equal to 10 with an exclamation, because that would be freaky if it did. All right. When we execute this code, we still get the false right here because that is the result of that expression. Here we're using that expression in this if statement, and as expected, because it's false, the code within this block does not get run. And that makes sense because 5 is definitely not equal to 10. Therefore, man, this statement is untrue, and this is untrue. Therefore, this never gets run. So that's a good thing. Now, when we see this right here, we see that we're actually using the value 5 and the value 10. And this right here is equivalent to this each and every time. So it doesn't really make sense to have a Boolean expression in our if statement that has hard-coded values, because this would always be false. So why in the world would we even want to have that in our code? The real value for Boolean expressions comes when in our program we may have two different Boolean, or we may have two different values that we want to compare, and if they are equal or not equal, we want to do something. We want to make something happen. And we may not have those values for comparison until later on in our program. So let's define some variables really quick. So let age and let, age and whether or not they have a driver's license. All right. So we've got these two requirements. We've got age and driver. No, because we want to do a comparison using numbers. So let's not do driver's license. Let's do age and shoe size. All right. So we've got age and we've got shoe size. Now, let's say that somewhere in our application from a web form, we receive the data from user. All right. And so later on in our application, later down here, we've got age. It comes back that the age is 12 and comes back to that they have a shoe size of 12. And down here in our application, once we have that data, we're going to do a comparison. Now, if the comparison equates to true, we want something to be done or output to the screen. In this case, we're not going to go with an action. We're just going to go with output to the screen just to keep it simple. So if age equals their shoe size, then the user is going to get a message that says, you must be brilliant. Because we all know, if your age and your shoe size are the same, you're a genius. There's just no disputing that. I'm being facetious. So right now, if we were to run this code, we will see that, man, we must be brilliant because our age and our shoe size are equivalent. And this program is telling us that if our age and our shoe size are equivalent, we are brilliant. And so we can take that to all of our friends and family and just let them know we are brilliant. If for some reason they don't have the same age and shoe size, they are obviously not brilliant. Therefore, the code doesn't get executed. So this video shows us a simple example of how we use a Boolean expression. In other words, we're using a different data type than a Boolean inside of an expression where as the result of the expression, we get a Boolean value. And in this case, we're comparing two numbers against each other. And if they are equal, then we get a true or a false as a result of that. Then the if statement can execute based on a true or false, which is exactly what it's built for. All it cares about is whether or not, as a result of whatever happens within the parentheses, it gets back a true or false statement. And in this case, depending upon that age and shoe size being equal, it'll either be true or false, and you'll either be brilliant or not.